Hello, my friends. I hope all of you are fine. This is the Narrative Stories channel. Let's start this story. Bruges, Belgium, often called the Venice of the North, is a town where time seems to stand still. The medieval architecture, winding canals, and cobblestone streets give it a charm that few places can match. It's here, in this picturesque town, that Thomas Verhoeven and Elise de Wit built their lives. Thomas, a dedicated architect, had spent years designing homes and buildings that blended seamlessly with Bruges' historic beauty. His passion for his work was matched only by his love for Elise, a painter whose vibrant works were inspired by the very landscapes that surrounded them. From the outside, their life seemed perfect. They had a cozy home by the canal, filled with the warmth of Elise's art and the solidity of Thomas's designs. Their relationship was one of mutual respect and shared dreams. They were partners in every sense of the word, with plans to travel the world, expand their careers, and perhaps one day start a family. Their friends often remarked on how lucky they were to have found each other, and even the townspeople, who knew them well, admired their bond. But, as with many things in life, appearances can be deceiving. The cracks in their relationship were small at first, almost imperceptible, but they were there. Thomas had become increasingly engrossed in his work, often spending long hours at his drafting table, leaving little time for anything else. Elise, while supportive of his ambitions, began to feel the strain. Her art, once a source of joy, started to feel like an escape from the growing distance between them. The turning point came when Marc Dubois entered their lives. A French art dealer with a keen eye for talent, Marc was drawn to Elise's work from the moment he first saw it. He visited her gallery frequently, offering not just praise, but insights and opportunities that flattered and excited her. What began as a professional relationship soon deepened into something more personal. Marc's charm, his appreciation for her art, and the attention he lavished on her filled a void that had slowly grown between her and Thomas. Rising action. As weeks turned into months, Thomas noticed changes in Elise, but he struggled to understand them. She seemed more distant, more preoccupied. The laughter that once filled their home had become rare, replaced by silence or terse conversations. Elise spent more and more time at her gallery, often returning late at night with vague explanations that left Thomas feeling uneasy. The tension between them reached a boiling point one evening when Thomas found Elise sitting alone in their living room, tears streaming down her face. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with guilt and sorrow, and before he could ask what was wrong, she blurted out the truth. She was pregnant, and the child was not his. It was Marc's. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Thomas felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under him. The life they had built together, the trust he had in her, the future they had planned, all of it was shattered in an instant. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The woman he loved, the woman he had shared his life with, had betrayed him in the most unimaginable way. Elise, seeing the pain and shock on Thomas's face, tried to explain herself, but her words felt hollow. She spoke of loneliness, of feeling neglected, of finding solace in Marc's company. But nothing she said could undo the damage. Thomas, reeling from the revelation, couldn't bring himself to speak. He turned and walked out of the house, needing to escape the suffocating weight of what he had just learned. The news of Elise's infidelity spread quickly through Bruges. In a town as close-knit as theirs, it was impossible to keep such a scandal a secret. Friends who once welcomed Thomas with open arms now avoided him, unsure of what to say. The gossip was relentless, and everywhere Thomas went, he felt the weight of their judgment. Even the familiar streets of Bruges, which once brought him comfort, now felt foreign and hostile. Elise tried to reach out to Thomas, but he couldn't bear to face her. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. He spent his days at his office, throwing himself into his work in a desperate attempt to numb the pain. But no matter how hard he tried to distract himself, The memories of their life together and the image of Elise with Mark haunted him. Eventually, Thomas knew he had to confront Mark. He arranged to meet him at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. When Mark arrived, he looked uncomfortable and guilty, but also resigned. The confrontation was tense, filled with anger, accusations, and bitter words. Mark admitted his role in the affair, but insisted that it had never been his intention to hurt Thomas. He claimed that his feelings for Elise had been genuine, that he had fallen for her despite himself. But Mark's words did little to calm the storm inside Thomas. All he could see was the man who had taken everything from him. The conversation ended with Thomas walking away, more confused and hurt than ever. That night, Thomas found himself at the bridge where he had proposed to Elise all those years ago. The same bridge where they had shared so many happy moments. The moonlight reflected off the water below, and for a moment, Thomas felt as though he was back in time, reliving those precious memories. But the weight of the present was too heavy to ignore. He was faced with a choice: to try and forgive Elise, to rebuild their life for the sake of the unborn child, or to walk away and start anew. Falling action. As he stood on that bridge, Thomas knew that neither choice would be easy. If he stayed, he would have to find a way to forgive Elise, to trust her again, knowing that their relationship would never be the same. It would be a long and difficult journey, filled with pain and doubt. But there was also the child to consider, a child who was innocent in all of this, and who would need a father. Could he put aside his anger and resentment for the sake of that child? If he chose to leave, he would be walking away from the life he had built, from the woman he still loved despite everything. He would be starting over, alone, in a town that no longer felt like home. But perhaps, in time, he could find peace, and maybe even happiness, somewhere down the road. In the end, Thomas made his decision. If he chose to stay, the story would end with him returning home to Elise, ready to face the challenges ahead. They would try to rebuild their relationship slowly and painfully, but with the hope that one day they might find happiness again. If he chose to leave, the story would conclude with Thomas walking away from the bridge, leaving behind the past, and setting out on a new path, uncertain of where it might lead, but determined to find his own way forward. A heart torn apart, an unfaithful bond, is a story about the complexities of love, trust, and betrayal. It explores the difficult choices we face when our lives are shattered by those we hold dear, and the strength it takes to rebuild, whether that means staying or moving on. The ending, whether one of reconciliation or separation, leaves the reader with a sense of the profound impact that love and loss can have on our lives, and the resilience required to find hope in the midst of heartbreak. Non-linear narrative. The night was still, with only the soft lapping of water against the stone bridge breaking the silence. Thomas Verhoeven stood alone, staring down at the canal that wound through the heart of Bruges, Belgium. The same bridge where he had once knelt to propose to Elise de Wit now seemed to mock him. The moonlight cast long shadows, reflecting the turmoil within him. He could barely think, his mind clouded with anger, confusion, and sorrow. How had it come to this? How had their love, once so strong, crumbled into nothing but ashes? Years earlier, the world had been much simpler. Thomas and Elise had met in a small cafe, tucked away in one of Bruges' many winding streets. It was a chance meeting, one that neither could have predicted would change their lives forever. Thomas, fresh out of university and eager to make his mark as an architect, was captivated by Elise from the moment he saw her. She was sketching at a corner table, completely absorbed in her work. When she looked up and their eyes met, something clicked, a connection that was immediate and undeniable. Their relationship blossomed quickly. They spent hours walking through the narrow streets of Bruges, talking about everything and nothing. Thomas admired Elise's artistic talent, her ability to see the beauty in the world around her. Elise, in turn, was drawn to Thomas's passion, and his steady, reliable nature. They complemented each other perfectly, and before long, they were inseparable. Thomas proposed to Elise on the very bridge where he now stood, overwhelmed by the happiness of that moment. She had said yes, tears of joy streaming down her face, and they had embraced as the city around them seemed to stand still, witnessing their love. The narrative shifts, flashing forward to the arrival of Marc Dubois. Marc was a French art dealer with a reputation for discovering new talent. He had come to Bruges on business, but when he stumbled upon Elise's gallery, he was instantly captivated by her work. Her paintings, filled with vibrant colors and raw emotion, spoke to him in a way that few other artists did. Marc began visiting the gallery regularly, offering Elise advice, encouragement, and eventually friendship. At first, Thomas welcomed Marc's presence. He was glad that Elise's work was being appreciated by someone in the art world. But as time went on, he began to notice subtle changes in Elise. She became more distant, more absorbed in her work, and less interested in spending time with him. The once easy conversations between them grew strained, filled with silences that neither knew how to fill. Elise, meanwhile, was struggling with her own emotions. She loved Thomas, but she couldn't deny the attraction she felt toward Marc. It was exciting, new, and dangerous. Marc was everything that Thomas was not: spontaneous, unpredictable, and passionate. She found herself drawn to him in a way that she couldn't explain. And before long, their relationship crossed the line from friendship into something more. The moment of truth came one evening, when Elise, unable to bear the guilt any longer, confessed to Thomas that she was pregnant, and that the child was Marc's. The revelation hit Thomas like a physical blow. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The woman he had loved so deeply, the woman he had built his life around, had betrayed him in the worst possible way. His world, once so stable and secure, was now in ruins. The narrative flashes back and forth between the moment of the confession and scenes from their past, happy memories that now seemed tainted by the knowledge of what Elise had done. Thomas's mind raced as he tried to make sense of it all. How had they come to this point? Was there something he could have done to prevent it? Or was this always their fate? As the news spread through Bruges, Thomas found himself increasingly isolated. The town that had once felt like home now seemed filled with strangers, people who whispered behind his back, who looked at him with pity or judgment. Even his closest friends seemed distant, unsure of what to say or how to comfort him. Thomas felt like a man adrift, lost in a sea of emotions that he couldn't navigate. Amid his turmoil, Thomas knew there was one person he needed to confront: Marc. He arranged to meet him in a secluded part of town, away from prying eyes. When they met, the tension between them was palpable. Marc looked uncomfortable, but there was a resolve in his eyes that made Thomas's blood boil. The conversation that followed was heated, filled with accusations and anger. Thomas demanded to know how Marc could have done this to him, to their family. Marc, for his part, didn't offer excuses. He admitted to his feelings for Elise, but insisted that he never intended to hurt anyone. He claimed that their relationship had been about more than just physical attraction, that he had genuinely fallen for her. But his words did little to ease Thomas's pain. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too fresh. The confrontation ended without resolution, leaving Thomas more confused and hurt than before. He had hoped that facing Marc would bring him some sense of closure, but all it did was deepen the sense of loss and betrayal. The narrative shows Thomas walking away from Marc, his mind racing with thoughts of what could have been and what might still be. As Thomas wandered through the streets of Bruges, he found himself back at the bridge where he had proposed to Elise. The memories of that night came flooding back. How happy they had been, how full of hope for the future. But those memories now felt like a cruel joke, a reminder of everything he had lost. Thomas knew he had a choice to make. He could try to forgive Elise, to rebuild their life together for the sake of the child, or he could walk away and start anew, leaving behind the pain and betrayal. The narrative explores the weight of this decision and the conflicting emotions that pull him in different directions. If he stayed, he would be choosing the harder path, one filled with doubt and pain, but also with the possibility of healing and redemption. If he left, he would be choosing freedom, but also loneliness and the uncertainty of a future without the woman he still loved, despite everything. In the end, the story leaves the decision in Thomas's hands, offering two possible endings. If he chose to stay, the narrative would show him returning home to Elise, ready to face the challenges ahead, with the hope that they could rebuild their life together. It would be a story of forgiveness, of finding strength in the face of adversity, and of the resilience of love. If he chose to leave, the narrative would follow Thomas as he walked away from the bridge and from his past, setting out on a new path. It would be a story of loss, but also of self-discovery, of finding the courage to start over, and of the possibility that, one day, he might find happiness again. In either ending, a heart torn apart, an unfaithful bond, is a story that delves deep into the complexities of love, betrayal, and the difficult choices we face when our lives are turned upside down. It's a story that will resonate with anyone who has ever loved, lost, and found the strength to carry on. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next?